recording. All right. Yeah, please. So good evening and welcome. It's really nice to meet with all of you through. So good evening and welcome. My name is Charles Smith. I work at the David P. Weikart Center in Michigan, where it's snowing very heavily right now, and maybe where you are as well. It's very nice to meet you all. I'm very pleased to be here on this evening of celebration and learning about the Possibility Project's excellent work and the SEL Challenge. I know that I'm being plugged into the presentation, so I will pick up at my spot. I first would want to say, though, that I really appreciate Paul and the Possibility Project. One of the great things about this work in the SEL Challenge was that we got to work with some really terrific people who really knew what they were doing. And in coming to the Possibility Project with Paul and Elizabeth and Megan, we encountered a team that really knew what they were doing. Their curriculum has 40-some parts, and they could write them all out. And the spiral in, spiral out part of the method was, especially important for naming practices that a number of the providers used across the study and that got highlighted as best practices. So I just want to start with a shout out to excellence that the Possibility Project represents in the work of building SEL skills. We couldn't be here to talk about a more pertinent subject. Our national politics have a whole lot to do with showing us exactly how people might feel when the words that are used are not don't attempt to be inclusive and sensitive to how they might feel, and what it's like to be ruled by our reactivity instead of our rationality. So there couldn't be a better time. Picking up on Paul's timeline, and to tell you a little bit about the Weikart Center. So the Weikart Center is a continuous improvement measurement organization. We specialize in measuring teacher practices, or what we call instructional practices that adults deliver with kids in settings called classrooms and youth programs and after-school activities, and the many other places where adults and kids come together to learn and to achieve some developmental purposes for those kids and in their skill development. Picking up in the 90s, so this is from a Weikart Center perspective. In the 90s, we came out of early childhood work. Our parent organization was the High Scope Educational Research Foundation. You may know the Perry Preschool Study. Our work in active learning, our model of high quality instruction, comes right from that work. We are a legacy product. But we started to pick up steam in the 90s in particular in the work with older kids, coming out of the work, the universal pre-K movement, where states were starting to build out their infrastructure to serve more kids with really high quality pre-K. And they started to build systems to improve the quality of those services, one practice at a time, or at the level of instructional practices. So we came out of that world in the early 2000s. The William T. Grant Foundation was really our venture capital. They invested in the basic research on program quality for older kids. There was a lot of that work with preschool age youngsters, thinking about the attributes of adult-child interaction that contributed most to early childhood development. We picked up a thread of that work and carried it through to older kids. Following that basic research investment from William T. Grant in their setting measures program, in the mid-2000s, a number of foundations started to pick up priorities around quality improvement systems and improving the quality of adult practice in after-school settings, and our work merged quite naturally into that. The Wallace Foundation was very important in funding many providers around the country to improve the quality of services, but many other local and regional foundations as well. And then we come to, that should actually say 2013 to the present, where we're transitioning from our work on quality, our work focused on the attributes of settings, what the adults are doing, what structures they've put in place, but we're transitioning to a focus on what's going on with the kids, what are the specific skills that they're building, and what's the model of the individual kid and their important parts that allow us, their mental skills, that allow us to know if they're gaining SEL skills while they're spending time with us in various kinds of settings. So this Susan Crown Exchange work, the work you'll be discussing tonight, is really an important part of that evolution. So the SEL Challenge was first and foremost a study. We brought expert practitioners together and talked to them about their practice, and I think Paul has probably already summarized a good deal of that for you. There were a number of findings from the study. From the qualitative part of the study, we produced the SEL standards, or standards for SEL practice. When we say practice, we mean two things. We mean either the actual practices that staff are enacting, are putting in place during instruction, but we also mean that the key experiences that that young people have in those settings according to the staff. So the staff have mental models of good experiences or learning experiences that kids have, and those mental models are really important for driving practice. We continually throughout the study ask the staff, our expert practitioners, what are the skills that kids are building in your settings, the adolescents are building? What are those SEL skills, and how do you know? What are the behaviors they're demonstrating when they're demonstrating those skills to you? And what are you doing when they're demonstrating those skills? And that, what are you doing when question? It's kind of an if-then logic. If the kid presents this behavior, then I respond in this way. That was the real deep insight into practice that were provided by the expert practitioners. So we came up with 38 standards, 70-some practice indicators that break the standards out a little bit, and 327 or so vignettes of practice. So a deep, rich download from a group of expert practitioners and one of our key research partners, Reed Larson, who's 20 years of qualitative work on the subject of adolescent social and emotional skills, provided a really important part of our evidence base. Another purpose of the study, in addition to the standards, those are mostly described in the blue book pictured in this slide, were a suite of SEL performance measures and benchmarks for performance, really. So we developed measures that were designed to measure the practices that were going on in the setting. These are observation-based measures. The Weikart Center is known for one of these measures, the program quality assessment. So we adapted this observation-based measure for use in program settings that were focused on social and emotional skills. Another one of the key measures is a staff rating of youth behavior. And in this case, we have staff rating child behavior in such a way as to let us know if those skills change during the course of the program. Our goal was to develop an individual skill measure that was especially sensitive to the out-of-school time intervention, to settings that last 9 months at the longest, sometimes shorter. We wanted measures, we wanted to know if skills are developing in those settings, but we needed measures that were especially sensitive to that change. Finally, there were a set of, there are the what we learned by measuring all these things. There's a body of validation evidence. It turns out that the expert practitioners and the offerings that they brought for our consideration as examples of high quality or up to the standard SEL practices, it just so happens those programs were super high quality as measured by our quality instruments. The vignettes, the 320 some vignettes, these are paragraphs of language from the experts in the 8 programs. We supply those for clinical translation. There are many languages you can use to describe the same thing. So for each standard and practice indicator, we had multiple descriptions from multiple different actors and programs about how they implemented that standard or practice indicator. Finally, we brought a theory for performance measurement. We wanted to talk about who the individual child is, what it means for their SEL skills to grow, so that we could put measures on the right parts and know if in fact SEL skills were growing. Those were the findings, and they are summarized primarily in the purple book. Again, the standards and curriculum features and vignettes are described in detail in the blue book, and the evaluation of that work is described in the purple book. So the policy opportunity is now for social and emotional learning. In the Every Student Succeed, the ESSA law, Every Student Succeeds Act, there is the now widely discussed fifth indicator that could allow schools and districts to measure perhaps culture and climate or some other set of SEL indicators as an official accountability indicator for the school. In juvenile justice reform, the work that Mark Lipsey has done at Vanderbilt, the Department of Justice funding of the SPEP tool, work that's gone on at the George Washington Center for JJ Reform, Shea Bilczek, Michael Umpierre. It's a model of juvenile justice reform that lets us think about how a disposition with a court matches up best for the treatment or the response that the society or the court system or the county, whoever the powers are that are responding to the disposition with the court, that response is the right one. And we know from positive youth development that we could probably do a better job to responding to many kids who have dispositions with courts, but for whom punitive responses are likely, or exclusionary responses are likely only to produce negative results. Federally funded childcare, again, the work on especially responding to trauma and chronic stress is really emerging. The Office for Planning, Research, and Evaluation at HHS has put a lot of emphasis into this lately, and just great work on how to respond to kids with difficult SEL histories. Finally, early childhood education, as I mentioned, it's our background, responsive classroom. There are a number of curricula or approaches that are used in early childhood that are just really fundamentally focused on SEL. So it just seems to be happening everywhere. The public sector is really interested in social and emotional learning. It's also true for the evidence-based movement. We've had the problem. We do randomized trials, but the evidence-based programs are difficult to implement well. So if it's difficult to implement the program well, we don't know if the trial really tested the program. And the only way you're going to get at that is by thinking about the practices, what the adults are doing, what are the practices that make up the evidence-based programs. And so we're also seeing support for work on SEL standards and practices coming from the evidence-based social movement itself. Finally, philanthropy is really leading the charge in the development of both SEL measurement and accountability models and new interventions. And so I think that by talking about the SEL capacity, the SEL curriculum that moves through your programming, that opens doors to philanthropy currently as well. Just a few more details about the findings from the study. This is a graphic representing the baseline skill set in social emotional skills. Again, these are behavioral indicators, so indicators like the youth's ability to express emotion words, to have a vocabulary for emotions and emotion words. So behavioral kinds of indicators of that sort, and what we see are, this is a cluster analysis, or it's a profile of the 150 kids who were in the SEL challenge, vulnerable adolescents. And what we see are that about 25% of the kids are in that low profile. That is, they're low on basically all the skill measures. Another 30% are high, or in a middle profile, and then about 40% are high. What the scale means, 5 means basically every time there's an opportunity to demonstrate that behavior, the kids do, and a 1 means every time that there's an opportunity to demonstrate that behavior, the kids don't. So what we see here are a number of things. When the kids came into the program, there were already a group that were able to perform right where we wanted them in the setting. The setting did an adequate job of scaffolding a whole bunch of kids to high levels of performance, which is exactly what we want. That said, there were some low-scoring kids who in most cases did not respond, according to the definition of a skill, the ability to act appropriately as a context dictates. So these kids were having a hard time doing the self-management necessary to carry out SEL behaviors as they were measured here. So it was a mix of ability. The setting really scaffolded some of the kids automatically. And when I show you a next slide on change over time, basically what happened was in the SEL challenge, over the course of these programs, that low skill group disappeared. Most of those kids who were typically not responding appropriately with SEL behaviors, at the beginning of the program, became the kids in the middle cluster, and a bunch of the kids in the middle cluster moved up to the top. So there's movement from low to high. These are all points of validity for the larger body of work. Another point of validity for the larger body of work is we took an established measure of teacher quality that measures quality SEL practices. That was our program quality assessment into the programs, and we measured the quality of the teaching that happened there with the expert practitioners. And the short story is the pink bars are the SEL challenge programs. They were much higher quality than the comparison group we put together of hundreds of other out-of-school time programs from across the country serving middle school and high school youth. So this is a first critical validation point that to build SEL skills, you need really high quality programs, and that the folks who gave us the SEL standards, the expert practitioners, were in fact delivering extremely high quality programming for the youth they serve. A next and final part of the findings are the actual growth trajectories for the SEL skills. So we measured skills in two ways in the challenge. First, we looked at beliefs, kids' beliefs about I can, I am, really efficacy indicators for the various SEL domains. And then we again measured the SEL behaviors, which are on the right. The thing to know, these are very composite scores combining across multiple scales within each domain. This is all discussed in great detail in that purple book, the methodology and findings for the SEL challenge. The short story is everything went up. All the trajectories were positive across the 3 time points. For the behaviors, the measures, behavioral measures, the ones that we really designed to be especially sensitive to SEL skill change, they went up the most. All the change was positive, statistically significant, and in all cases, the models indicated that the kids who started out the lowest gained the most. Now again, there were not control groups in this study. This is not a controlled design in that sense. There were controlled variables in the growth trajectories. But the thing that we can say is that these settings were very high quality compared to other settings from around the country, and that the kids' skills in all cases went up over 3 time points. So these are, again, they're not definitive evidence points, but they really make us think that the standards, the ideas about good practice have some validity, because the offerings, the programs and experts that those standards came from themselves demonstrate really high quality, and they move kid SEL skills over time. Finally, there are a number of many other findings from the study, but I wanted to point out to discuss the concept of responsive practices. These practices were identified in the curriculum features portion of the standards for SEL, and it's just, the responsive practices are so important because what the SEL Challenge offerings did really well was give kids the chance to experience challenge and then success in various domains of SEL skill. So that process of letting kids experience challenge, especially children who have had more difficult SEL histories, means that you have to support them really well. The environment can trigger reactivity. I'm having a challenge. Emotion in particular is involved. And what does the staff do? In that moment, what does the staff do? And so what we found across the SEL Challenge offerings were that staff were really good at responsive practices, at facilitating, scaffolding, modeling, and coaching in real time. So that when a student experienced a challenge in the moment with an SEL skill domain, I'm super happy because something went right, but I can't control my elation. I'm getting a little bit out of hand. Maybe I'm diminishing someone else with my success. How does a staff step in that moment and help channel that positive emotionality into in a way that is positive for the rest of the participants in that positive emotionality? And these kinds of practices were there ever present in all 8 of the exemplary programs we looked at. And if you think about the scaffolding and modeling, these programs were scaffolded pretty well. Half the kids who came in could do the skills and half the kids couldn't. So the level of difficulty was probably just about right for the kids in each group. And modeling, if we think about it, most learning is mimetic, right? You watch somebody else do something and that's how you learn to do it. And so having the staff there to model self-regulation, to model self-control, to model all the positive ways that you can channel your energy and motivation and emotion is such a critical part of the SEL challenge and the findings. And I wanted to bring this up last because it was a part that Paul and his crew and the TPP model were especially well prepared to exemplify, to discuss, to talk about, to bring their expertise to. So I'm really glad that you are all there having a chance to talk with Paul, and hopefully Ravi is there. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I hope you have a great meal and good luck in your work. Take care.